Hey there, and welcome to the Career Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Betsy Jewell. Some of you may remember me as the host of the High School Hamster Wheel podcast. I started that show over 5 years ago, and I loved every minute of it. But now here I am, starting this new show because navigating the world of work today, especially with the rise of AI and constant change, can feel overwhelming, unpredictable, and let's be honest, a little intimidating. This podcast is for anyone who wants to not only survive, but thrive in the future of work. Whether you're a recent graduate launching into a new career, or someone who is figuring out your next step, pivoting careers, or just trying to stay ahead of the curve, my goal is to bring you the insights, tools, and conversations that make career decisions feel a little more clear and a lot more intentional. Today's episode is the perfect way to start this podcast journey. I'm joined by Jeremy Schifeling, LinkedIn expert, career strategist, and co-author of Linked, one of my favorite books on networking. In this episode, we talk about how to build real, authentic connections in an AI-driven world. Whether networking makes you nervous or you're not sure how AI fits into your job search, Jeremy shares practical strategies and fresh ways to think about career building in 2025 and beyond. Now let's get started. Hi, Jeremy. Thanks so much for being here today. It's great to talk to you again.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. We go back. You were a guest on the High School Hamster Wheel podcast. Now here you are on the Career Intelligence podcast. So I'm thrilled that we're continuing to collaborate and talk about this stuff. So today's conversation is going to be super interesting, and I know it's really relevant to everyone, networking in an AI-driven job market. So you are, I call the king of networking. I've learned so much from you. So I have a bunch of questions I'm going to ask you. So let's talk about the evolving role of networking, right? I mean, back in the day, it was face-to-face, and then it was maybe some email, and then of course LinkedIn came along and changed all that. But can you talk about the evolution and sort of where we are now and how we got there?
Yeah, I think the big change in networking is just in terms of the specificity of it. Now, there was a time probably 20 or 30 years ago when if you wanted to do networking, that meant going to a mixer, some kind of corporate event, and just randomly hoping to bump into someone who might have something in common with you. I'm sure it did work out for some people, but again, it's a pretty exclusive kind of experience where you have to be invited. You probably have to be an extrovert. You have to have a fancy suit or attire. And I think it just ended up excluding a lot of people from the entire process. Whereas now in 2025, between LinkedIn, AI, there are all these tools to just find the perfect person in the world, reach out based on all the things you have in common, and have a really great connection that doesn't mean you need to rely on events or fortuitous running into someone. It's just purely about, hey, there's someone out there who I can learn from. Let's make that connection.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. This new world of online connecting, which isn't super new, except that it's changing and evolving pretty much every day. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about sort of your foray into LinkedIn and how you kind of became an expert. And I have your book in the background.
Yeah, for me, it's very personal because I'm an introvert by nature. The idea of going into an event with 500 people, all schmoozing, just makes me sort of recoil with dread. And so when I got a chance to work for LinkedIn a few years ago, it was really eye-opening because all of a sudden I could see, hey, why should I have these awkward conversations with random strangers when I could just find someone who went to my same school, who has the same passions, and just geek out for like 10 or 15 minutes in a much more natural way. And so once I saw what I could do myself, then I started to say, hey, why don't other people know about this? Whether you're an introvert or an international student or whatever the case may be, we all have our challenges, but there are so many ways to engage with networking more authentically than existed before.
So in my career coaching, most of my clients are college students, recent grads, early career, and they really struggle, right? Because they haven't built their network yet. So what do you think about, or what tips do you have for them to kind of start to build that network, both online and offline, and how technology can help them with that?
Yeah, so I think there are 3 layers they have to go through. First, they have to know why they're networking. Then they have to understand why they're actually doing a favor to the person on the other side. And then finally, tactically, they need to know how to actually reach out and have that conversation. So I'll just go through them really quickly and we can expand if you like. In terms of why they're networking in the first place, I think it's twofold. Number one is for learning. Like you don't know what you don't know until you start reaching out and talking to people who are doing it. So better to learn from experts than just reading a bunch of blogs. And then number two, when it comes to hiring, you have a massive advantage, about 10x based on all the studies, if someone refers you or puts in a good word for you, than if you just apply cold online. So for all those reasons, you want to start networking. Now, if you put yourself in the shoes of the alum or the person you're reaching out to, why would they want to help you? Why would they even want to, spend a single second helping you? Well, it turns out that a lot of research shows that as you get more successful in your career, you have this impulse that psychologists call generativity, which is, you can only be so successful yourself. You can only make so much money. The real sort of human joy of having that success is paying it forward to the next generation. That feeling of you're leaving a legacy, you're paying it forward in the same way you were supported in turn. So always know that when you are reaching out, even if you're super young, that person on the other side of the phone is actually getting a huge gift themselves. And then third and finally, comes back to that sort of piece of with tools like LinkedIn, with tools like AI, it doesn't have to be this thing of putting together an entire letter or having business cards. You're just finding someone who maybe went to your school, has something in common, and you're just being a fan. You're saying, Betsy, I love what you're doing with your podcast. I'm thinking about starting a podcast myself. Could I learn from your experience? And if you can just put yourself out that way, that's the only spark you need to get started. So those are the 3 layers.
I think about this, right? And it's a great way. I think it's easier for people who, like yourself, maybe are introverts and the face-to-face is really tough for them, or they don't know how to start a conversation. But at the end of the day, you need to balance the difference, right? You need to balance the online with the real world in-person stuff. Any tips for people to do that?
Yeah, so I do think that a lot of the prep work can actually be done online if that helps people. So you say, hey, again, you're not just throwing yourself into a random mixer and trying to network your way all the way over across the room. No way. That's just completely exhausting for anyone who's not built that way. Instead, you're literally going on LinkedIn. So you're online. You're saying, show me everyone who went to my school, who works at my dream company or works in my dream role. You're picking out a few who really resonate with you. You can read their profiles at your own time and in your own convenience. And then you're just reaching out with like 200 characters saying, hey, I'm a student at your alma mater. I love what you're doing as a teacher, as an architect, as a chef. Could I learn from your experience and what you've learned along the way? And those magic words can all be shared without any face-to-face, just purely on your own. The one part that does have to either be face-to-face or at least live is the conversation. Because students ask me all the time, oh, can't I just text or chat back and forth? And I'm like, well, you could do it. You're just not going to get as much out of it. Mm-hmm. And the other person is not going to feel as satisfied by the experience. So for all the reasons we talked about, if you want to get that big advantage that comes when it comes to learning and getting hired, you do have to connect at some point, even just for 10 minutes.
And for people, that's great advice. And for people who have a LinkedIn presence and have been using it and connecting with people and are feeling like maybe they're not getting the results that they want, how is AI changing the landscape of that? Can you use AI as a tool to help build that network or grow a new one?
Yeah, so I'll mention a couple places where AI can help and then also one place where you shouldn't be using it.
Okay, good. Perfect.
Yeah, because there's definitely a dark side. The first place where AI is good is even before you start networking, you might say, hey, I'm a student. I have no idea what I want to do with my life. What does it mean to find an alum at a company I like? I don't even know what the companies are. So if you go to like ChatGPT, and say, hey, I'm really passionate about sustainability. I want to make the world a better place. I'm really analytical. I'm great with data. What are 10 job titles that could be a really good fit for my skill set and my passions? ChatGPT will start spitting out the stuff where it's like all these jobs you didn't know existed, like sustainability data analyst or whatever. And now when you go to LinkedIn to do your search, you actually know what to look for because you have a lead, you have a sense of a North Star. The place where, AI can actually hurt you, unfortunately, is once you find those alums. I know it's so tempting to say, oh, I don't know what to say. I'll have ChatGPT write the connection request. And then before you know it, you have this super phony, bogus message that says, hi, Betsy. How are you doing? I would love to chat with you, blah, blah, blah. And for the alum, it's just so off-putting because they know that you use AI. It just makes you seem lazy. So instead of doing that, here's my final hack. You can actually download the alum's entire profile, and you could actually upload it to ChatGPT and say, hey, what are 10 things this alum and I have in common? And all of a sudden, you have all these ways to strike that conversation, not based on just false bravado, but things you actually share in common that could be a powerful spark for your conversation. So even if you're feeling exhausted creatively, that's a great way to get some ideas.
Yeah, I always encourage my clients to use it for research and to, do a check on the things that they're writing, but they should be doing all the writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so important.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing I love about it, not just AI, but technology in general, is it's really giving opportunity to a wide range of people, right? People maybe who didn't have the access or the ability to connect with others, whether it be alumni or other people in their area. How do you think AI is now and will continue to sort of provide better access?
Yeah. I think between AI and LinkedIn, so much of what I talked about as the status quo of 30 years ago has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like we always talk about the old boys club.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm sure the old boys club is still alive and well, but the reality is that any single LinkedIn user anywhere in the world now has the ability to reach out to any other LinkedIn user anywhere else in the world. Mm-hmm. It's not about where you went to school. It's not about, how fancy your zip code is or your clothes or whatever. Like that is a big revolution. And then add on top of that, hey, if you're an international student, English isn't your native language. Did you feel locked out because you didn't have a good way to converse with these people? Well, now you have a way to really, get feedback on your writing, say, review my letter, tell me if there's anything I need to change before I submit it. And you can actually communicate at an all-star level, even if you're coming from a totally different culture or linguistic background. So I do think access is becoming less of an issue.
And for people who aren't on LinkedIn yet, but are, want to put their toe in the water, right? It all starts with the profile.
Yeah.
And, there's obviously we know the basics, the name, the headline, the photo, but what kind of thoughts or strategies would you have to share for people who really want to get started, who really want to up their game and optimize their profile?
Yeah. So I'm going to actually say something a little bit counterintuitive, which is if you go to LinkedIn and it starts asking you all these questions, like what's your headline and what's your about section and blah, 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 and you have no idea what they're talking about, that can actually be a massive turnoff. But the things that we just talked about for the last 10 minutes, you don't really need a very fancy profile for any of that. You just need to get on the site, get access to alumni, get access to people in your field, and then just start reaching out. And then the profile only becomes important a little bit later in your search when you say, okay, now I got to get to the point where I got to send the right signal to recruiters, not just to alumni. So I want my profile to really represent me well. And again, classic Pareto principle. You don't need to worry about everything like your endorsements or your hobbies or blah, blah, blah. Just focus on the things that recruiters care about. So number one, is your headline really clear? This is your little piece of text below your name, really clear about what you want. So this is the job that I want. Does the about section below it lay out why you'd be a good fit for that role? So here are some of my best accomplishments. Here are some of my skills. And then does your experience section include some of the keywords right from the job description? Another little AI hack is you can always take your resume or take your LinkedIn profile and say, compare it to this job description. Which of these keywords am I missing? And if it says, hey, you're missing cross-functional collaboration, you're missing Python, and those are skills you actually do have, you should be listing them on your profile because that's what recruiters use to find you. So bottom line, don't freak out about it, but do take care of the things that are most important, which are the ones we just discussed.
Yeah, that's a great point because I think it is. It's sort of overwhelming and intimidating for people getting started. But you make a good point. You can use it as a tool before you're actually really beefing up or optimizing your profile. When you think about the job market, which it's been challenging lately, right? And we keep hearing from LinkedIn and other sources that it's, 60% or more of jobs are being filled by referrals, right? Yeah. So what does that say for like the online job boards like LinkedIn Jobs or Indeed or any of those?
Yeah, I think the really honest answer is that they're a trap. Not in a sense that like they're selling us a false bill of goods, but your odds are just so low relative to the work involved. And so if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to spend 5 hours today blasting out a bazillion applications, it might feel rewarding because it feels like you've made progress, but really you just entered a lottery with lottery-like odds. On the other hand, because of the data being so clear about the power of referrals, if you had spent those 5 hours finding people inside the companies who either went to your school or have a mutual connection in common, start reaching out, striking up conversations, and a couple of those people go to bat for you, that's just a way better use of your time than applying cold online because the stats are just so clear. So I don't think it's so much that, a job board is bad, just a less efficient way to go once we know what actually does work.
Yeah. And when you talk about reaching out in those messages, I think it's important to be clear. Like, you're not messaging someone on LinkedIn and saying, hey, could you help me get a job, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Can you talk about that approach and what works best?
Yeah. And I think, it's so funny when I do my workshops, I'll say, what's the best way to apply? And everyone says referral. And then I'll say, how many here have actually gotten a referral? And all the hands go down. And I think the gap between that is that people know that referrals matter, but they're not sure how to get them. So let me sort of explain a little bit about how I would do it. I think once you have someone that you want to reach out to, best case scenario is you get introduced by someone you have in common. And LinkedIn can show you that. It says, Aaron knows Betsy, Aaron knows you, Jeremy. Have Aaron introduce you. And then on top of that, even if you don't have the connection, you just reach out and say, hey, I'm a fellow alum or I'm a student at the alma mater, whatever you have in common. Then when you have a conversation set up, you're not coming in guns blazing, give me a referral. You're just getting to know the person. You're building some connective tissue. And again, LinkedIn and AI can be helpful because you can use it to figure out good questions to ask, things that they care about, things you have in common, which is all fertile ground for a great conversation. And only at the end of the conversation do you want to pivot things a little bit, once you've established some trust, where you might say something along the lines of, before you go, I know you've got to run. If you were back in my shoes at XYZ University, trying so hard to get just one interview at Google or, the New York Times or wherever it is, what would you be doing if you were in my shoes? And I find there's something so powerful about that question, especially with alumni, because they were in your shoes. We've all been in those shoes before, and we were probably helped out by an alum when we were a student. And so if you frame it that way, people tend to be like, hey, I was referred, my whole team was referred, referrals are like gold here. And then they either say, hey, let me refer you, send me your resume, maybe I'll get a referral bonus, or they just leave the door open. They say, hey, maybe we can stay in touch, maybe I can refer you down the road if the right opportunity shows up. Either way, I want students to have the confidence to keep that conversation going and actually do ask for that referral once you've built the connective tissue. Because if you're going to work so hard for it, you might as well get it.
And if you're further along, so let's say you're not a college student or right out and you're mid-career or later career, I would assume that the approach would be slightly different.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, a lot of what you're going to be doing is relative not only to where they sit, but where you sit. So for example, if you're mid-career and you're reaching out to someone who's just a peer at another company, maybe you're sharing some of the things that you've learned from where you sit and you're picking their brain about their advice. And so it's less of a mentor-mentee kind of relationship and more of a conversation between equals. But either way, it comes back to the fundamental things, which is we like people who are interested in us. We like people who care about the things that we do.
Yep.
And so you come back to the same ground.
So let's talk about the industry, because it's been a tough one. And do you think AI can help us predict where it's going or, trends that are coming?
Yeah. Well, I do think that AI has a couple of impacts. So there's, first of all, the way you might use AI as a job seeker. And so again, you could go to AI and say, here's my resume, here's what I'm excited about, give me some opportunities that may be off the beaten path. So that could be interesting. But then I also think there's going to be a new premium on soft skills because AI is going to actually end up doing so many of the technical things so much more easily. So like if you think about the technical stuff that we have to do today, whether it's writing Python or SQL or dealing with spreadsheets, ChatGPT can do all that stuff right now. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn close.
Right.
On the other hand, if you said, ChatGPT, I want you to go to my boss and negotiate a salary raise, that kind of interpersonal stuff is just really, really hard. Like it might even know the right things to say, but it's just not going to be able to do that the way that a human can. And so if I was going to read the tea leaves a little bit, it's not that you should only go into a soft skills job and avoid technical jobs. It's just that whatever skills you're building, you should also continue to build those authentic human skills because I think those are going to become more and more valuable the more AI takes over the rest of the world. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I hear from recruiters and hiring managers and I read in all the journals, like what employers are saying is, people are missing those soft skills. They're coming into the job and they're not prepared. And, there's ways to build those, but until you're in the real life scenario, right? And I just think of students, you collaborate on a project and you do critical thinking, but the rubber really meets the road after you graduate and you're out in the real world. So I agree with you. I think there needs to be more of a focus on that. But I think everybody's so caught up in the technical part of it, right? I have to be able to know how to do this specific thing versus what are the other skills I need to bring.
Yeah. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg himself just 2 weeks ago said, we plan to have by the end of 2025 an AI that is as good as a mid-level coder.
Mm-hmm.
There are probably 1 million plus students in America right now who are getting a computer science degree because they want to get those mid-level coder jobs someday that pay $200,000.
Right.
If the AI can do that starting this year, imagine what things will be like by the time they get to that point in their career. So bottom line, make sure that you have really valuable, unique skills, not just the same things that a machine can do today.
So what would you say for a computer science student, right, who wants that job? What should they be doing now or in the near future to be setting themselves up for success?
Yeah. So if you think about who the really sort of most valuable coders are inside a Silicon Valley company where I'm based, it's not just the ones who are good at coding. It's the ones who are good at coding plus really great interpersonal skills. Okay. I'll give you 2 examples. The CTOs of all the companies I've worked at, chief technical officers, probably were not the best coders, to be honest, but they knew how to lead an organization. In fact, the CTO of LinkedIn, who's now the CTO of Microsoft, is the one who convinced Satya Nadella to invest $100 billion in OpenAI, which looks so prescient in retrospect. And I'm sure he was only able to do that through his interpersonal skills, his powers of influence. And so the thing that made him such a valuable technical leader was not the technical skills, but it was actually the other stuff. Or you take a product manager who's in charge of every cool product from Gmail to the iPhone. It's usually an engineer who's really good at leadership and vision, who can bring a team together to get something built, even though it's super hard. And so I would just encourage anyone who's studying these skills today, don't just say, I'm going to be some cog in a machine, because we will have little cogs for that machine very soon. Instead, figure out how do you build a better machine? How do you lead a machine to ultimately drive the right things for society? That's where the true value is going to be unlocked.
Boy, that's great advice. So thinking ahead to AI, and I did another interview with somebody else for this podcast about like careers of the future, right? And this is like, from Jeremy's brain. What do you think we're going to see that we're not seeing today? Like if you had to predict kind of, I don't know, 1, 3, 5 years from now, where do you think we're going?
Yeah. So I think the big unlock, and this may even happen this year, is that everyone is excited about agentic AI, basically AI agents who operate autonomously. Because if you think about it, even though ChatGPT came out 2.5 years ago, even though people have spilled gallons of ink talking about it, hasn't really changed our society. If you were like an alien who came to Earth in 2022 and then in 2025, you wouldn't notice any differences. On the other hand, I think when AI goes from being a little text box that you chat back and forth with to something out there in the world that's, booking your plane tickets or helping you write your resume or whatever the sort of challenge is, then you have this big change. And it's going to be a change for good and for bad, frankly, right? It's going to be an amazing thing for consumers. If you're a consumer, you just use this tool to get more stuff done. But if you're the professional who provides that service, now the question is, again, what is that value add that you offer over something just going off and doing it on its own? And it's usually going to come back to something like, do you have a better rapport? Do you have better service? Do you have better relationship skills? And so I think that's the big challenge and the opportunity, not just 5 years from now, but starting this year.
So what do you think the adoption rate is going to be like for, I hear from a lot of people, I don't trust AI. I don't want to put any information in there. It's going out into the world. All our information is going out into the world. Yeah. Let's be honest.
That's right.
But for people who feel like that's an invasion of privacy or just too crazy reckless.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting because there's always this technology adoption life cycle that people talk about where you have the early adopters who will do anything that's new just because it's so
It's cool.
novel and exciting.
Yeah.
Then you have the laggers on like the far end who say, no, like I'm never going to do it. I want to go back to the caves and the fire and all that. And then you have this big majority in the middle is somewhere in between. And I think that even though that's going to be true for everything, it's going to be a much faster move through that curve because of competition. So like, think about it this way. If I, as a business owner, and I am, like, am able to get an advantage in the market by having my AI agents go out and do marketing for me and do advertising for me and all this stuff that might take me, weeks and weeks today, all of a sudden, everyone who competes with me in whatever my industry is will say, wait, we've got to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just going to force people across that curve, even if they go slightly kicking and screaming. And so I think it's less about the like gee whiz factor, the way that ChatGPT has been about, and more about just sort of the time savings, the cost savings, all that stuff, in the same way that like once Uber and Lyft came out, it was hard to justify going back to paying for a cab if it cost more and it was less convenient. And so I think we're going to see similar levels of quick adoption for this.
I'll be interested to see it.
Yeah.
And see if all your predictions come true, which I'm sure they will.
Do an encore performance in a year and see
That's
how
a
things
good
pan
idea.
out.
Okay, so what are your tips? What are your top 3 tips for job seekers to use AI tools and, in their networking and do it effectively?
Yeah. So, this is going to be funny because we're talking about AI, but it really goes back, 3,000 years or so to Socrates, who said the most important thing that you have to do is you have to know thyself. And I still see all these people who on paper you would say are super successful because they're working at Google or Goldman or McKinsey or whatever the dream company is. And yet they're miserable because they're doing the job that would have been great for their parents or their friends, but that's not right for them.
Yep.
And so I know it is so tempting, especially if you're unemployed or you're looking for a new job, just to go right into application mode. Let me start getting a new job ASAP. If you can just carve out that time, even a few days, to go back and forth with AI or a great coach like Betsy, to like start to understand who you are and what actually makes you tick, that's going to make everything else you do so much easier, not just in finding the job, but for the rest of your career. So I do think starting there. I think once you understand where you belong, the biggest sort of shame in my mind is so many people know exactly what they want in their head, but I wouldn't know it as a recruiter or hiring manager looking at their resume or cover letter or LinkedIn profile. And again, I'll go back to what we had talked about before. If you know exactly that thing that's really going to make you happy because you've sat down with Betsy and you've figured it out together, don't make me play a guessing game, because if I have to guess, I'm not going to choose you. Make yourself obvious. Show me how, if you are the candidate that I choose as a recruiter, you're going to get me promoted, not get me fired. So again, give it to me straight, not just keywords, but just make it really obvious why you can do this job so well. And then finally, I'll bring it back to relationships. I'll bring it even all the way into the interview room. So it's not just for networking. I see so many great candidates who are amazing on paper who don't get the job in the final analysis because when they come to interview, all that I hear about is I can do the job, I can do the job, I can do the job. But what I don't hear, and this is what I'm subtly listening for, is why would I want to do the job with you? And if you forget that human piece, which is, hey, if your boss is going to spend more time with you than his or her own family, you better be a great teammate and a great friend, not just a great cog in that machine. And so if you can always bring it back to that human piece, I think you're going to be more successful at every stage of your journey.
Oh, that's such an excellent suggestion. It's the people side. You're right. Like the clients I work with, they're very focused on making sure they can tell their stories, right, through Star or Carl or whatever about the projects they work on and the things that they did. But I always say they need to know that you're a good fit. They need to understand that people are going to enjoy working with you and that you're going to be part of the team. And that's great advice. Great advice. Yeah. And I am sort of, I bang the self-discovery career exploration drum with every client I work with. Like, you have to know who you are and what you want and what your deal breakers are. If you don't know that, how can you pick the right course of action or the right course? So that's fantastic. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to tell everybody where they can find you and reach out to you, because I know they will want to. I have one of your books on my shelf in the background, and all your content. So where can they find you and get all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to keep the conversation going. So obviously I'm slightly a fan of LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me there or just check out my website, which is thejobinsiders.com.
Great. Thank you so much for being here and for all this fantastic information and insight. I really, really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you, Betsy. And good luck to everyone out there. I know it's a tough moment right now, but I think there's so much opportunity and so much stuff that's bubbling up right now. And I think if people can leverage some of the things we discussed today, they're going to be right there well poised to capture that opportunity.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Career Intelligence Podcast. I always love talking with Jeremy because his insights are not only practical, but deeply aligned with the work I do every day as a career coach. Like Jeremy, I believe that self-discovery is the foundation of any successful career path. Before you can build a network, craft a standout LinkedIn profile, or make confident career decisions, you have to start with understanding who you are, what you value, and what kind of work will energize you and not just impress others. I also couldn't agree more with Jeremy's reminder that in a world increasingly powered by AI, it's your human skills, communication, connection, curiosity, that will set you apart. And by the way, if you are or know someone who's a college student, recent grad, or early career professional who's feeling uncertain about what's next, I'd love to help you or them navigate that process. Visit betsyjewellcoaching.com to learn more about how I support young adults in clarifying their direction and achieving meaningful, fulfilling careers. Until next time, stay curious and keep building your career intelligence.